All right, so I'm going to zoom in here so we can see it. And it says Northern writers try to reform society. So it says Italian humanists were very interested in reviving classical languages in classical text. So we have this word again that we've seen before, humanist. And basically what that means is that humanist, what humanism is, or humanists, are people that believe that humans are capable of anything through education, and believed that we should learn about history and the classical works and English, or not English, but reading and writing, and learn as much as we can about the sciences and philosophy and things like that. So these Italian humanists were very interested in reviving classical languages in classical text. When the Italian humanist ideas reached the North, people used them to examine the traditional teachings of the church. So this is the first way they try to change society. They try to change the church. The Northern humanists were critical of the failure of the Christian church to inspire people to live a Christian life. This criticism produced a new movement known as Christian humanism. The focus of the Christian humanism was the reform of society. Okay, so trying to change society, they're trying to change religion. Of particular importance to humanists was education. The humanists promoted the education of women and founded schools attended by both boys and girls. So we already see two big changes that these writers are trying to bring. One, a change to the church, and two, a change to society and education. So let's look at the church change. Christian humanists. The best known of the Christian humanists were Desiderius Erasmus of Holland and Thomas More of England. The two were close friends. In 1509, Erasmus wrote his famous work, The Praise of Folly. This book poked fun at greedy merchants, heartsick lovers, quarrelsome scholars, and pompous priests. Erasmus believed in a Christianity of the heart, not of one of ceremonies or rules. He thought in order to improve society, all people should study the Bible. So this is a challenge to the church, and they're trying to change church and religion by saying that everyone should learn from the Bible, not just priests, not just people in power, not just men, but everyone should learn from the Bible. Thomas More tried to show a better model of society in 1516. He wrote the book Utopia. In Greek, utopia means no place. In English, it has come to mean an ideal place as depicted in More's book. The book is about an imaginary land where greed, corruption, and war have been weeded out. In Utopia, because there was little greed, utopians had little use for money. So Thomas More here is making a challenge and trying to change society by saying that we need to be less greedy and focus more on education and kind of weeding out greed and corruption and war, trying to create this better society. The primary source, this is what Sir Thomas More wrote in Utopia. Gold and silver of which money is made are so treated that no one values them more highly than their true nature deserves. Who does not see that they are far inferior to iron in uselessness, since without iron, mortals cannot live any more than without fire and water? So he's talking about how gold and silver have no real value. And in this perfect world, as people become more educated and people become more knowledgeable, to see that gold and silver really, they don't have any value other than they're pretty, iron, he compares iron as something you can actually farm with and use as tools, is much more valuable than just gold and silver. More wrote in Latin. As his work became popular, More's works were translated into a variety of languages, including French, German, English, Spanish, and Italian. And that is the vernacular. We talked about this in the Chem chart. We talked about this in the PowerPoint, but they started writing in the native languages. I would say this is number 3. So we've seen, as these writers are trying to change society, they're actually trying to make sure that everyone can read it. So they start writing and translating writing into French, German, English, Spanish, Italian, and allowing for Europeans to be able to read in the vernacular. So right there already we have three examples of the way they're trying to change society. One, they're trying to change religion. Two, they're trying to change people from being greedy and only wanting money and wanting to be more educated. And number three, they're trying to change the way people learn by using the vernacular and allowing more people to be able to read their works. Let's keep going though, because there's maybe better ones or more examples here. So women's reform. During this period, the vast majority of Europeans were unable to read or write. Those families who could afford formal schooling usually sent only their sons. One woman spoke out against this practice. We can see that this is another change that they're trying to get everyone to be able to get an education, including women at this time. Christine de Pizan was highly educated for the time and was one of the first women to earn a living as a writer. Writing in French, again, the vernacular for France, writing in French, she produced many books, including short stories, biographies, novels, and manuals on military techniques. She frequently wrote about the objections men had to educating women. So she wrote about how she didn't like that men didn't want women to get educated. In one book, the book of the City of the Ladies, she wrote, "I'm amazed by the opinion of some men who claim that they do not want their daughters, wives, or kinswomen to be educated because their morals would be ruined as a result." It's a crazy idea. Here you can clearly see that not all opinions of men are based on reason and that these men are wrong. So she's calling out men, and this is hundreds of years ago, the beginning of this movement. And it goes on to say, Christine de Pizan was one of the first European writers to question different treatment of boys and girls. However, her goal for formal education for children of both sexes would not be achieved for several centuries. So this is the beginning, but we can see that they're trying to make changes. So really, three big ones is the challenge to the church, that learning should be not only in the hands of priests, but should be in the hands of all the people. This challenge to society to be less greedy and to reach out to be more learned. This idea use the vernacular, using the native languages of the people so more people could read. And then finally, this challenge to women's availability to education and the fact that women should be more on an equal playing field than of men. So right there's four examples for you. So you can very easily answer that first question. So let's go back and look at the other reading. So the first question referred to what we just read, provide at least three examples. We gave you four in that reading. So let's go to this next one. This question refers to the printing press spreads Renaissance ideas PDF. And how did the invention of the printing press help to spread Renaissance ideas faster? In your answer, explain what came before the printing press. So we saw this in the video yesterday, but this is going to kind of reinforce that idea about the printing press and should be a pretty easy answer for us if we watch the video and we're doing this reading. So let's take a look at this. So opening this up. All right. So again, we got one page. Actually, it's about half a page, and then it goes into some detail on like how the printing press worked. So printing press spreads Renaissance ideas. And again, our question is, how did the printing press help to spread these ideas? Okay. So we'll start out with the Chinese invented block printing, in which a printer carved words or letters on a wooden block, inked the block, and then used it to print on paper. In the video yesterday, we saw how that worked. It was a very slow and arduous process. Around 1045, Beijing invented movable type, or a separate piece of type for each character in the language. The Chinese writing system contains thousands of different characters, so most Chinese printers found movable type impractical. So the Chinese invented block printing, and they invented that movable type that Johann Gutenberg would use later. However, the method would prove practical for Europeans because their languages have a very small number of letters in their alphabet. So really we're seeing that Gutenberg kind of put these ideas together that the Chinese actually had come up with. Gutenberg improves the printing process. During the 13th century, block printed items reached Europe from China. European printers began to use block printing to create whole pages to bind into books. However, this process was too slow to satisfy the Renaissance demand for knowledge, information, and book. So as these Renaissance ideas are starting to get printed out, the printing press is going to be that technology that really allows for greater amounts of information to spread. So around 1440, Johann Gutenberg, a craftsman from Mainz, Germany, developed a printing press that incorporated a number of technologies in a new way. The process made it possible to produce books quickly and cheaply. Using this improved process, Gutenberg printed a complete Bible, the Gutenberg Bible, in about 1455. It was the first full-size book printed with movable type. The printing press enabled a printer to produce hundreds of copies of a single work. For the first time, books were cheap enough that many people could buy them. At first, printers produced mainly religious works. Soon they began to provide books on other subjects such as travel guides and medical manuals. And they'd also go on to print, as we saw, those northern writers in the early 1500s, so 60 years after the creation, 70 years after the creation of the printing press. And we know by that time there were hundreds of printing presses in Europe. The writers of the northern writing would start to have theirs printed and spread in the vernacular. So this is a really great time. So this is the printing press process. Many known technologies coming together. This screw type press was actually used for olive oil or wine making. The movable type was a Chinese idea pulled together. Paper used by the Chinese. Oil-based inks from Europe. And we saw this in the PowerPoint that I did, but it would take 5 months to make one book by a single scribe, and could be, 500 books could be made in that same amount of time with the printing press. So going back, and really I want to highlight this. For the first time, books were cheap enough for many people could buy them. Okay, so if we go back and look at the question, it said, how did the invention of the printing press help to spread Renaissance ideas faster? So we have at least 3 examples here. Number one is, and in your answer, make sure you talk about the block printing and scribes and how it would take them 500 times longer to make a book. But whenever you get to talking about what helped to spread ideas faster, 1, it printed much faster, but 2, it was much cheaper, much cheaper. And then number 3, it was printed in the vernacular to where they could actually read it in their own language, and it didn't have to be read to by someone of the church or someone from the government or someone that's much more wealthy and literate and had the money to learn to read. So those 2 questions should be answered in the Dropbox. Again, I copied them from up here and put them in the Dropbox, and you just kind of hit enter and type them down below just like this. Make sure to hit that submit my work button. Now, when you type into a Dropbox, it could delete. It does say all changes saved. Hopefully, if you exit out, let's see if I exit out, if it'll stay there. You have not submitted your recent changes. So, I wouldn't leave. I would stay. And just make sure you have those answered, then hit submit my work to be able to get those submitted. So otherwise, if you get this done, you need to take your No Red Ink quiz. And if you have that done, you all are done for the day. And if you have any questions, I am in the Google Meet if you have questions, or email me. All right. Thanks, guys.